What is up, Eagles Nation? Happy football weekend yet again. This is week 2 of the NFL season. Actually got started, of course, Thursday night with another wonderful Thursday night game between the Carolina Panthers and the Tampa Bay Bucks. And, of course, Tampa wins that one. That game wasn't part of this week's Festive Four because Festive just said, nah, not that one. So we're making this video a little later than I thought I would make the video this week, but it is Saturday, the day before Sunday, NFL Sunday again, and again the Eagles, of course, a Sunday night game on NBC. Eagles did okay with Michaels and Collinsworth calling their games over the past few years, including, I think we all know what game. So, so yes, the Eagles are looking to go to 2-0 on the season. The Falcons looking to avoid 0-2 to start the season. Of course, they are home in Atlanta. And what's it called? The Mercedes-Benz the Dome or whatever it is there in Atlanta. Of course, they used to play in the Georgia Dome. Now they opened into a little more of a posher dome. Very nice looking stadium. It is a stadium that I wouldn't mind, visiting at some point. It looks like a beautiful stadium and a nice place to watch a game. Maybe one of these years, whenever the Eagles go back to Atlanta, maybe we'll do a little road trip. I've never actually been to Atlanta, so it would be a first for me in many ways. But anyhow, of course, the Eagles and Falcons, the seemingly annual game between these two teams, another battle of the birds. And the Eagles, of course, in recent years have gotten the better of the Falcons. Of course, all those games were here in South Philly. Now they're going to go down south to play the Falcons. Now, the Falcons have beaten the Eagles the last couple times they were in Atlanta. I believe they played in Atlanta. The last time the Eagles won a game in Atlanta was 2009. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that was the game Mike Vick was the Eagles quarterback. Interestingly enough, of course, the former Falcon great was with the Eagles. And that was the last time the Eagles got a win in Atlanta. They have had some disappointing games since in Atlanta. Of course, the last 3 times, though, they have beaten the Falcons. In fact, Doug Peterson, as head coach of the Eagles, is undefeated versus the Falcons. Jim Schwartz, as a defensive coordinator with the Eagles are 3-0 against Atlanta, and he's, stifled Atlanta's potent offensive attack at times. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, all 3 games came down to the wire. All 3 games came down to a Matt Ryan to Julio Jones pass, if I remember correct. And I believe the first time of these 3 games was a few years ago, Peterson's first year as head coach of the Eagles. Carson Wentz, of course, his rookie season, that he did not get hurt in. He played the whole season, and he beat the Falcons. So Carson so far is 1-0 against Atlanta, too, for whatever that's worth. But I believe towards the end of the game, Atlanta had the ball, and there was like a 4th down pass with Matt Ryan to Julio, and it went between his hands or something like that, if I remember correct. It was like it was one of these like diving attempts or whatever it was, if I remember correct. And the old noggin isn't what it used to be. But of course, we all remember a few years ago in the divisional round of the playoffs, Matt Ryan, of course, trying to connect to Julio. Ball goes through Julio's hands. Basically, that's it for the game. Eagles win, go on to the NFC title game, and of course went on to do that. And then last year, of course, to start the season on banner night for the Eagles, the game came down to a last possession for the Falcons, and this time Julio caught the ball, but he was driven out of bounds, so it didn't count, and the Eagles go on to win. So the last 3 times these teams have played have been pretty close, contested games, come down to the wire, come down to a play here or there not made, or maybe made for the Eagles, not made for the Falcons, and the Eagles have won. And the Falcons have certainly they do have a bitter taste in their mouths for playing the Eagles over the past few years. And I'm sure they're happy that this game is in Atlanta. Although, I mean, when you have a head coach of a team, when it's your home opener of a season and he's like encouraging the fans to make noise, I don't know what that says about the Falcon fans. I don't think you're ever going to have to see Doug Peterson say that here. And we don't play in a dome. So, it is what it is. I know there's going to be a lot of Eagle fans there in Atlanta. There's, obviously, I don't think the Falcons have a overly imposing home dome advantage. but it is a dome. Obviously, there are things that come with a dome, so the noise is going to be there. Although I'm sure there'll be plenty of fans wearing green making some noise too. And look, it's early. I mean, it's week 2. It's hard to say in week 2 that you have a desperate team playing, but the Falcons are 0-1 coming into this game. It is their home opener on the season in the schedule. They are playing a team that has given them fits over the recent years. They are going up against a defensive coordinator that's given them fits over the years. So they definitely don't want to go 0-2. And they definitely want to get a little measure of revenge on the Eagles. So it is one of those games where, and again, I don't want to throw the word desperate, because week 2, it's hard to say a team's desperate. It's not like you're playing in November, December now. I mean, it's September. So, you kind of, I don't know. I don't want to use that word desperate, but I will use the word dangerous. And I do think the Falcons, even though they got blown out last week in Minnesota, I do think that they're a dangerous team coming into this game because, they don't want to go 0-2. I mean, you are playing in a division with the Saints, off to doing their thing again. So, obviously that game came down to a big kick at the end, but the Saints are still there. The Panthers are 0-2, and the Bucs probably aren't going to be a factor in the division this year, I would imagine, in that division, even though they did win on the road in Carolina on Thursday night. So the Falcons are coming into this game, and they know, look, they go 0-2. I mean, you have the Saints in that division. I mean, it's tough. It's tough to rebound with that. They will play the Saints twice, so, for what that's worth, but, they definitely don't want to start the season 0-2. But at the same point, I mean, the Eagles are, as we know, a very good team. Now, I did misspeak last week when I said we escaped that game injury-free. Of course, that's not the case. Of course, had a pretty big injury in that game. Malik Jackson going to miss the rest of the season with the Liz Frank injury. So, that's a shame because that was one of their big offseason acquisitions. Of course, strengthening up that defensive line, and that's something that, this organization loves to do, is have that depth and strength on the D and O lines. So that was a big loss, and it can't be understated. I do think it was good in the offseason. They brought Timmy Jernigan back because his role is going to increase now, where basically it was before bringing in Malik Jackson. But I do think that was a good move for them to not only bring in Malik Jackson, but bring back Timmy Jernigan, of course, to have that depth on the defensive line. Now, obviously, that gets a little lessened now with the injury to Malik Jackson, a guy who won a Super Bowl years ago. Was a big part of that defense in Denver a few years ago, and a pretty big part of the defense in Jacksonville over the past few years. So it's definitely going to be a loss. No doubt about that. And, of course, they did not go after Jadeveon Clowney when they had an opportunity to get him. Didn't make it happen. The Seahawks did. And, looking back on that, I mean, look, you can't forecast that Malik Jackson's going to get hurt in week 1. And, it's hard to do. And that move, of course, was made just before the season started. But looking back, yeah, I mean, it would have been nice to have gotten Jadeveon Clowney, who can play on the outside and on the inside. So, that is one of those things that, you look back on it like, yeah, and you see that Seahawks really didn't give up much for him. It may have been a good move to make, but hey, it is what it is. There's plenty of other teams that passed on him too. So, the Eagles aren't alone there. Seattle did, to their credit, and he's going to be a big part of that defense. But it is what it is. We're still, I think, sound on the defensive line. I do think we took a hit with the injury to Malik, but I think overall they're still going to be sound. Pass rush is going to be important. And look, the last few years, when they were able to beat Atlanta, it was partly because this defensive front got pressure on Matt Ryan. And Matt Ryan is a step up from Case Keenum a week ago, and the Redskins hung 20 first half points on the Eagles, and only 7 in the second half, so there was adjustments made at halftime, and one of those adjustments was getting more pressure on Case Keenum. Now, he did miss a big pass down the field, that's been well documented, but at the same time, Matt Ryan might not miss that pass, but at the same time, there was much more sustained pressure in the second half against Case Keenum than there was in the first half. And week 1, you throw a lot out. because you see it across the board with most teams in week one. There's going to be, it's almost like an extra preseason game. And it's because starters, a lot of teams don't start starters that much during the preseason. So that first week, even into the second, even into the third or fourth week of the regular, it's almost like September in some cases with some of these teams is like extra preseason just to get the players going, to get the plans that are there to be executed. And sometimes it does take a little time to get that going. So it wasn't overly surprising to me last week that the Eagles got off to a bit of a struggle. And then after the first half, it was, it's like the light went on. You see it a lot in week one, and even, like I said, into the next few weeks in the regular season. It really isn't in some cases until October, November, December, you see these teams really start to separate themselves, really start getting it going. And injuries have a role too. But, you start to see the pedal go down to the metal at that point. And all these plays that we're going back and thinking about in September, like, why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they doing that? And then the next thing you know, after the few weeks, it's here we are, So it's not overly shocking to me that they did get off to a slow start last week. I was a little surprised at the defense. I was. Obviously, going into that week, I felt... and I said, as I was making my breakfast in that video, that, they should be able to get pressure on Case Keenum because the Redskins' offensive line was not very good. It was basically patchwork put together before the season got going. And, Trent Williams, of course, not in there. And, there's, guys who should have been beaten more in the first half that, the D really wasn't getting much pressure. And I'm sitting there, with Tony. Tony was here. We're sitting there. We're just going, why aren't we able to get more pressure on Case Keenum? It's like the Redskins had all day to make whatever plays they wanted to make. Well, obviously, the second half, it was a little different. Going into this week in week two against the Falcons, again, you're playing against the team, even though they're playing at home, but you're playing against the team, and they do have more weapons offensively than the Redskins do. But at the same time, you're playing against a team with a suspect offensive line. And you really, the onus is to get pressure on Matt Ryan, because if you let Matt Ryan sit back there, he's going to pick you apart. He's a really good quarterback, So it's the same across the board when you're playing any good quarterback. If you're going to give them time, they're going to beat you, okay? So the one thing that I think has to be stressed going into this week and into this game tomorrow night is they got to get pressure on Matt Ryan. And the last few years, they have been able to get pressure on Matt Ryan. And that's one of the reasons why they were able to beat the Falcons the last few years. Obviously, those games were here, not in Atlanta. But there has to be sustained pressure on number two. And you have to be able to get home with those with that pressure. And I know Jim Schwartz is not an overly blitzing type of defensive coordinator, and it drives us nuts because there's lots of times where we're watching these games and I'm making videos after the games and saying, if they just would have blitzed just a little more. Now, look, does this team have the personnel to be able to blitz as much as we would hope they do? Maybe not, and maybe that might be part of the reason why they don't blitz as much, because linebacker is not an overly a strong aspect of this defense. They're not great blitzers. I do think Malcolm Jenkins and the safeties, I think McLeod and Jenkins are pretty good at blitzing. We remember back in the a few years ago to the NFC, the divisional round, where McLeod came in on a blitz and knocked Matt Ryan how many yards back and pretty much killed that drive for the Falcons. And that was early in the second half when the Falcons still had somewhat of a had a bit of had some momentum going. So that was big, at that time for that to call that blitz, and McLeod basically came free, in that. And I know that was a few years ago, but going into this game, and like I said, do I expect them to come out and blitz a ton? No, because that's just not the MO of this team. That's not the MO of a Jim Schwartz defense. And again, it drives us nuts because there's lots of times where the front, the D-line isn't exactly getting the type of pressure that they would hope. and the quarterback's back there having all day to pick them apart. So that is, that is a concern, for me. But at the same time, I mean, I see the Falcons O line, and I just think they're just very beatable. So the Eagles should, and I say should because I said last week they should be able to get the Case Keenum. They should be able to get the Matt Ryan defensively. Offensively, the Falcons' defense I don't think is horrible against the pass, but they are pretty poor against the run. And I know that over the years, Dougie P is from the Andy Reid tree, and Andy Reid loves that pass. They love to pass the ball, and there isn't a lot of teams in the league that's going to be run first. It's a passing league. It's a passing game anymore. Long gone are the days of the hand the ball off in the first two snaps, and then you try to throw. I mean, it's a passing league, and you see all these offenses putting up these incredible numbers with passing. But you should have some sort of balance. And at the same time, I look at this Falcons defense, and I saw what the Vikings did a week ago against them, and they absolutely ran all over the defensive front of the Falcons. It's a bit of an undersized defense, and that's part of the reason why you can have success running on them. And the Eagles, I mean, for what it's worth, you talk about the failure for the Falcons the past year or so now to have this offensive line. It's one of the Eagles' strengths, and they're really good at run blocking. So I did like seeing the Eagles run the ball last week, and I wouldn't advise run Darren Sproles into the ground the first 4 weeks of the season, okay? I do think that this is a game that can be very beneficial for Jordan Howard. I think Miles Sanders can have a big game. I think Sproles can get in there too for some carries. But I would like to see Jordan Howard get the bulk of the carries this week because he's a banger back. He's that big brute of a back that could wear down a defense like Atlanta, who again is undersized. And you saw last week with Minnesota and how they were able to have success. Now, are the Eagles going to absolutely be able to duplicate exactly what Minnesota did? Probably not, because the Eagles are going to throw the ball a little more than Minnesota did a week ago. But at the same time, I think that this could be a big win for the Eagles. Is to get that running game going, and it will open up the passing game that much more. And we all know we have a lot of weapons. And I do expect to see us throw the ball a little more to the tight ends this week too. And I say tight ends because I do think that Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert are going to have a big role in this game. And look, if you want to keep if you want to slow down that Falcons offense with Ryan and Julio and Ridley and all them, keep them off the field. So sustained drives, long scoring drives, will keep that offense off the field. And that basically mitigates the dome, right? Because the fans are only going to make noise for so long. Okay, if you're having these sustained drives, it's tough. And fan bases are going to go in, we're making all this noise, but it's not working. They're still able to move the ball. Getting down the field, scored third down conversion. The noise isn't doing anything. So, again, I think it's really important for this Eagles offense to get off to a good start. Now, one of the other problems for this offense in recent years, ever since, of course, Coach Wright goes to the Colts to be the head coach, and Rowe comes in to be the offensive coordinator. And one of the big strengths of this team some years ago when they won Super Bowl 52 was they got off to great starts. I mean, great fast starts. Every week they were scoring. They basically came out and they basically threw the first punch in every game, just about, right? Last season it was different. Last season they got off to slow starts. The scripted plays just weren't being very effective, and it didn't matter whether it was Wentz or Foles in there. They just kept getting off the slow starts every single week, and in some of those games, it really came back to haunt them, because if you got off to a better start in some of those games that went to overtime, like the game in Tennessee, the game in Dallas, those could have been wins. And yeah, we can split hairs that they probably still should have been wins, and if one play went here or there. But at the same time, you get off to a better start in those games offensively, you win those games. And some of these other games that the Eagles lost last year, if you get off to faster starts offensively like they did the year prior, you're going to win more games than some of those losses. And it would be unfair and unrealistic to say they're going to go 16-0 every year. But if you get off to better starts offensively, well, that helps the defense too. But that also increases your chance to get wins. Now, last week, obviously, they didn't. They got into a 17-0 hole. At halftime, it was 20-7. Second half, complete role reversal, and they just, got shot out of a cannon, right? It was a completely different half in the second half. But I want to see this team get off to a better start offensively. And I think it's really important for them to do so because you are on the road. You're in a hostile environment against a team that wants to beat you bad because the Falcons have basically circled this game, over and over and over again because they this is, one of their, it's developed into a bit of a rivalry here with these two teams, right? So they want to win this game. If you get off to a good start offensively and punch them in the mouth early, you know what? If you go up against a team that you've lost a bunch in a row to, and that team comes out and hits you early, what happens, right? We've seen it. Right? I mean, those years that, for whatever reason, we couldn't beat the Redskins, or, years ago when the Giants used to give us trouble, right? It was always like, it was like, as a fan base, we would see, that team going down the field, getting off to an early lead, and we would feel a little, oh man, here we go again against this team, right? So it's the same thing with the players. The Eagles get off to a good start, punch the Falcons in the mouth early, both offensively and defensively, have success. The Falcons are going to be sitting there going, oh man, this team's doing this to us again, and that doubt starts seeping in, so that's why I say it's important for the Eagles to get off to a good start. And I know it's been a problem for them in recent years to get off to a fast start offensively, but I think that they have the capability of doing it. They certainly have the weapons. And now, okay, it's one game under their belt. You can talk about the preseason and not playing all you want. Well, they played last week. So it's one game under their belt. Let's get off to a better start here in week 2. They have plenty of weapons to do it. Let's just get it done. And like I said, I think it's vitally important for them to do that this week because you are playing an opponent who you have beaten the last 3 times. And that opponent they might get a little too geared up for this game. So they might make some mental mistakes. I mean, there could be a lot of, flags against the Falcons. I mean, there could be, anything can happen. There's a lot of human element in these things. And you're going up against a rival. You're going against a team that you haven't been able to beat in recent years. And yeah, I mean, you get a little too amped and things happen. Mistakes are made. So the Eagles have to just cash in. If the Falcons are going to give them an extra play here or there, cash in on it. Turn those extra plays into scoring drives, into scoring plays. Do I expect Deshaun Jackson to have 2 big burn touchdowns this week? Maybe not. Maybe 1. But I certainly, like I said, I believe other guys are going to be involved. I do think this is going to be a big opportunity for the tight ends in this game. Like I said, Ertz and Goddard to have big games. Alshon Jeffrey, I think. And because the Falcons secondary is decent, but the Eagles have them in size. I mean, you look at the receivers and you look at the tight ends on this team, and they're big, and they will go up and get the ball. So, again, I think that's an edge to the Eagles versus the Falcons defense. And be physical, I mean, they can out-physical this team all day, so all night, I should say, tomorrow night, right? Out-physical the Falcons. Come out, just, right off the bat. Smack them in the mouth right off the bat. Smack them in the mouth. Couple runs by Jordan Howard. Maybe you go over the top with Wentz to one of the tight ends early, or Jackson, or Jeffrey. Just early. Hit them early. Announce your presence early, basically. Said, yeah, you know who we are. And we know who you are. And you're going to remember who we are. So, again, I do believe it's a tough game. I think, like I said, they're playing a dangerous team. But at the same time, I think that this is a winnable game for the Eagles. I really do. And I do feel a little better about that now than I did when the schedule first came out. seeing just how these teams are right now, seeing where the weaknesses are for the Falcons, where the strengths are for the Eagles. And it's just across those weaknesses for the Falcons are right there to be had for the Eagles. That's just playing right into the Eagles' strengths. And if they play their game, and again, hey, as mistake-free as you can, I just think the Eagles are going to come away with a win. I really do. So I got our Birds winning this game and doing it to Atlanta again. And, I'll say I don't think it's going to come down to the last play of the game for Matt Ryan and Julio Jones this time around. But I do think the Eagles are going to get a win, and I'm going to call for, I'm going to call for a 10-point win for the Eagles. In Atlanta. I do. I just think, it's one of those games that I think the Eagles could pull away. I think the Falcons might make some plays here and there, get a little closer, but I think at the end of the night, I think that the Eagles will come away with a win and go to 2-0, and then get ready for Week 3 against Detroit next weekend. So anyhow, that's my take on this game tomorrow night. We'll see. Of course, I'll break it down as best I can afterwards. After the game, if not tomorrow night, certainly Monday, and we'll hopefully be able to talk about another Eagles win. So, let's keep it going. And with that being said, of course, it is another week, and of course that means another Festive Four. So here it is. My goodness. Festive goes 3-1 last week, and look at the shades come on now, right? The shades come on, right? What? Oh, that's how the fox trots. Oh, okay. So yes, Festive went 3-1 last week against for week 1 for the picks, and again, it's just strictly winners. The point spreads, the this, to that. That Festive's not interested in that. Just wants pure winners every week. These are the teams that are felt that are going to win. At least 4 teams that are felt going to win each week. We'll give you a 4-pack of picks, the Festive Four. So here's this week's hot off the presses, the Festive Four for Week 2. And again, had no interest in the Carolina-Tampa game, so don't worry about that one. So basically, these are the rest of the games that are starting, of course, tomorrow. So first of all, the first pick for the Festive Four for Week 2 is the Patriots over the Dolphins. Boy, you went out on a limb on that one, huh? Now I will say this. That's not as easy as a pick as you think, because over the years, the Dolphins have gotten the better of the Patriots in Miami more than any other team has gotten the better of the Patriots. Tom Brady has a losing record in Miami, including last season with that incredible finish, the Miami Miracle, where Gronk basically just kind of, he was the last line of defense, and that wasn't very good for them. So, anyhow, yes, the Drake return, the went in for the end after the laterals and the hook and ladder plays, and then. What a great game that was, right? What a great finish. So this is not as an easy pick as some of you might think. Okay, so Festive is going a little out on a limb here and picking the Patriots over the Dolphins in Miami. Don't say Festive doesn't that Festive will pick the tough ones too. All right, so but that is an interesting pick. I mean, how did you come to this? Oh. Belichick told you. Belichick doesn't talk to anybody. What, he talks to you? Oh, okay. Not everyone else isn't Festive. Oh, okay. Festive has more connections than Facebook, by the way. So anyhow, so the Patriots over Miami is the first pick. The second pick of the Festive Four is Baltimore over Arizona. That's another interesting game because you do have 2 athletic quarterbacks going at it in that one, and Baltimore, of course, looked so good last week against Miami. 5 touchdowns by Jackson, right? And Arizona with the rookie quarterback Murray, okay, didn't start so good, finished okay, tied with Detroit. So, but anyhow, Festive likes Baltimore. Also likes Minnesota over Green Bay. Oh boy, going against Green Bay 2 weeks in a row. Ooh. Got discount double checked last week. That was the only loss that Festive had in week 1 was the Bears. Okay, don't remind you. Okay, I know. So anyhow, we're hoping that Green Bay falls this week to Minnesota. And finally, and this is the team that I have because I survived. You know, the survivor thing. I survived last week with the Chargers winning in overtime rather over those luckless Colts. Okay, but I got Houston this week in the WIP suicide pool for week 2, and Festive likes Houston as well over the Nick Foles-less Jaguars. Get well, Nick. But Houston over Jacksonville rounds out the Festive Four. So again, New England over Miami, not as easy a pick as you might think. Baltimore over Arizona, Minnesota over Green Bay, and Houston over Jacksonville. That's it for the Festive Four. That fell right back on me. Okay, now that's that wasn't planned. But that's it for the Festive Four. And that will do it for this vid. Looking ahead to week 2 for the NFL and for the Philadelphia Eagles, hopefully to go to 2-0 to start the season with a big win against Atlanta in Atlanta for the first time since 2009. Hopefully our birds can get it done. And as always, from Festive and Mighty Fan, signing off for now. But let's go Green Birds this week. And can't exactly say go Birds because they're playing the Falcons. Go Green Birds this weekend in Atlanta. Hope to come home with a 2-0 start to the season and get ready for week 3 against Detroit. We'll see you after the game. Take care. Enjoy the game. And bye. Festive and I would like to remind you, if you enjoyed the content of this video, and why wouldn't you have? It's a wonderful channel. Go ahead and leave that like, comment below, because, you know, we always enjoy communicating. And go ahead and subscribe. And why wouldn't you subscribe? You know, because Festive has ways of finding people if they don't. Just saying. But anyhow, go ahead and subscribe. And once you do subscribe, make sure to click that bell icon. That way then you'll be alerted to any new content from this channel. And you do want to be alerted because why wouldn't you? So anyhow, enjoy the contents to come from this channel. And go ahead, like, subscribe, comment, click bell icon, all the stuff that, you know, you should be doing, because if you're on YouTube, you should be doing it. So go ahead and do it, and enjoy the YouTube-ness out there. Did that work? Hopefully. Spike the ball. No? Doesn't feel like it.